Hi, I'm Jim. If someone ever left you suddenly, coldly, so brutally that you questioned whether you ever mattered at all, this video is for you. Today, we're stepping into a difficult but powerful truth. Sometimes, the avoidant leaves most harshly when they actually feel the most. Not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to care without being overwhelmed by their own emotions. But we're not just here to talk about them. We're here to talk about what you felt, how you hurt, and most importantly, how you can heal without waiting for an apology that may never come. You might be carrying 100 unanswered questions. I'm not here to soothe you with cliches. I'm here to shed light on the emotional silence and pain you've been stuck in. If you're ready to understand, to stop blaming yourself, and to return to your own self-worth, hit subscribe, follow this channel, and stay with me till the end. Because what you're about to hear may not end the pain, but it might just begin your healing. We often mistake coldness for indifference, but with avoidant attachment, especially the dismissive type, the silence, the sudden disappearance, or even the cruelty in their goodbye, are not signs of an empty heart. On the contrary, they are often proof of a heart overwhelmed, in chaos, and without a voice to speak. You saw them disappear after a beautiful moment, after laughter, a cozy night, or after you said, "I love you," and then poof, it was like someone flipped a switch. No more replies, distant eyes. They say, "I just need space," but they never return. That moment tears your heart. And the most brutal part is this: you start questioning your own intuition. You ask, was it all fake? Did they ever feel anything? But here's the truth: the avoidant does feel deeply, but they learn to disconnect from those feelings early on. They can feel love, safety, even longing and attachment, but those very things awaken old fears. The fear of being seen, being dependent, being hurt. And because they feel too much, they run. Not from you, but from what you stirred in them: emotion. Because for them, emotion isn't a gentle stream. It's a flood, a threat. If you've been left without explanation, don't assume it means you weren't enough. Often, that abruptness is the clearest sign that you touched something deep inside them, something they couldn't control. Avoidants aren't unfeeling. They just don't know how to stay present with their feelings, let alone share them with someone else. They were never taught that feelings can be safe. That love doesn't mean loss of freedom. That intimacy isn't a trap. So the more real you are, the more fake they feel. The closer you get, the more they want to pull away. And when the emotions peak, they shut everything down, like a system overwhelmed, not because they don't care, but because caring terrifies them. And that fear wears a mask, a calm voice, logical reasons. I'm too busy. You're moving too fast. I'm not ready. But behind that mask is a storm they don't have the language to name or the skills to regulate. If you're hearing this, understand, you weren't left because you weren't lovable. You were left because you were too real, too close, too much of a mirror to what they're still running from inside themselves. And this is what makes everything so painfully confusing. Avoidants often leave not when you've done something wrong, but when everything feels right. When connection is at its deepest, when you finally reach the real part of them, they turn away, brutally, quietly, without warning. Why? To understand this, you have to look beyond what the eyes can see into their body, their nervous system. Because for an avoidant, intimacy doesn't signal safety, it signals danger. In the very moment you feel warmth and connection, they feel out of control. Their nervous system has been programmed from early on to believe attachment is dangerous. Maybe because they were rejected in childhood, maybe because love was met with disappointment, or maybe because they learned that vulnerability comes with pain. So even when their logic says, this person is safe, their body screams, run now. When you pull them closer, their nervous system recoils. When you say, I trust you, they hear, you're going to fail me. That's why something as simple as a kind word or a warm weekend can trigger their full internal alarm system. They don't run because they feel nothing. They run because they feel too much and have no capacity to contain it. It's a survival response, not a conscious decision. Like someone with an allergy, they can't control the reaction to something that feels too overwhelming. Except for avoidance, the allergen is emotional intimacy. You see their silence, but inside, there's a biological storm. Their heart rate spikes. Cortisol, the stress hormone, floods their system. On the outside, they may look calm, but their nervous system is screaming, "Retreat, retreat." And because they were never taught how to talk about their feelings, never given a language for their inner world, there's only one thing left to do: leave. Your pain is being left behind without answers, but their pain is not knowing how to stay, even when they want to. Many avoidants don't even understand why they panic when things go well. They ask themselves, "Why can't I handle being loved?" But the answer lives in their body. Their nervous system is so wired for defense that even love feels like a threat. And so comes the heartbreaking paradox. The more connected they feel, the more unsafe they feel. The more they realize you matter, the more they fear hurting you or being hurt by you. So instead of staying and facing the intensity of those feelings, they cut things off quickly, sometimes cruelly, to regain control. They choose finality, not out of strength, but because they can't tolerate the vulnerability of losing control while loving. Their heart doesn't shut down, it panics. And in that panic, they do what they believe will protect them: disappear. So if you've ever hurt from a sudden disappearance, know this: it's not evidence that you weren't lovable. It's evidence that you touched something they weren't emotionally equipped to process. Understanding this won't erase the pain, but it takes you out of the role of the rejected one and places you back into the truth. You did nothing wrong. You simply touched a part of them that was still deeply unhealed, and that part, not you, is what they were running from. Understanding the avoidance nervous system is a critical step. But to truly heal, you need to see this one truth clearly. The discard is not a stab at you, it's a retreat from themselves. And that's exactly why it feels so brutal. Because from the outside, it looks like someone who once held you, laughed with you, opened up, has suddenly vanished, as if you never mattered. But inside them, what's happening is a desperate attempt to escape emotions they cannot handle. This is hard to accept, because we're wired to personalize pain. You're left, so you assume you weren't enough. You're cut off, so you believe you did something wrong. But if you can pause and look more deeply, you'll realize that they're not trying to hurt you, they're trying to quiet the chaos inside themselves. They wear coldness like armor. They choose cruelty not because they're heartless, but because they hope it's harsh enough that you won't chase them. That way, they don't have to face the shame of being exposed, the fear of being seen too clearly. Avoidants don't break up like everyone else, they withdraw. Fast, sharp, final. No explanation, no remorse. Because they believe that if they make it hurt just enough, you'll give up first. And that way, they won't have to face the risk of being left. They won't have to explain the parts of themselves they don't even understand. What they don't realize is that the way they leave often causes a deeper wound than any open fight would. When someone who once cared leaves you without a word, you're not just grieving the loss, you're grieving the lack of recognition. No goodbye, no explanation, and your brain becomes trapped in the ambiguity, looping endlessly, trying to resolve what was never made clear. This is what you must hold on to. The discard is not a reflection of your worth. It's a distorted survival strategy, formed from old wounds, wounds you did not cause, and wounds you cannot fix. When avoidants feel emotionally threatened by closeness, their system doesn't reach for repair, it reaches for control. And the fastest way to regain control over overwhelming feelings? Cut off the source, which, tragically, is you. Not because you were wrong, not because you were too much, but because you touched a part of them they were not ready to hold on to. They choose withdrawal because intimacy is their blind spot. No map, no skill set, no trust. And in that darkness, their method of survival is not connection, it's disconnection. But this is where you have to do something different. You can't chase someone who's running from themselves. You can't save someone who protects their wounds by wounding others. You can't heal a heart that won't stay long enough to beat beside yours. You can love them, you can grieve what could have been, but you cannot abandon yourself for someone who isn't emotionally ready to stand beside you in safety. And when you finally understand that the discard was a reflex of fear, not a rejection of your worth, you'll stop trying to fix it. Instead, you'll start asking a new question. If this wasn't about me, then what is my next step to protect me? Once you recognize that their retreat wasn't meant to hurt you, but to shield themselves from overwhelming emotions, you begin to see a different picture, a quiet, devastating cycle that avoidants fall into again and again. And it's within this cycle that you'll start to understand why being with them often feels like living inside a storm. Advance and retreat, warmth and cold, closeness followed by a sudden disappearance. This cycle can be summed up in 4 phases: closeness, panic, discard, silent regret. It often starts beautifully. Despite their defenses, avoidants are drawn to connection. They let themselves soften a little, open up just enough. You begin to hope that they're changing, trusting, and then, without warning, something too real, too deep, too emotionally close happens. A long look, a whispered, "I miss you," a night of emotional vulnerability. That moment, the one you may treasure, activates their childhood-shaped defense system. And the second phase begins: panic. But it's not a panic you can see. It doesn't explode outward, it brews quietly inside. They begin pulling away, not from you, but from their own feelings. As you lean in, they don't feel safe, they feel trapped. Then comes the discard phase. They leave, maybe through ghosting, maybe through a vague excuse like being too busy, or maybe they grow so cold that you end up walking away first. But don't mistake their coldness for clarity, because what follows is often the most misunderstood part: silent regret. Avoidants don't just move on, they remember, they think, they miss. But because they lack the ability to face the emotions they just fled from, they also lack the language to return. Instead of saying, "I miss you," they watch your story. Instead of apologizing, they type and delete. They lie awake at night, replaying memories, but they won't send a message. This is the cycle that keeps you stuck, because you feel that they still care. You sense it in small things, you see signs, and that keeps your hope alive. But remember, unprocessed feelings do not equal healthy action. They may think of you, miss you, even ache for you, but if they don't know how to translate those feelings into responsible behavior, the cycle will just repeat. Here's the tragedy. They miss you from afar, but are afraid to come closer. They regret, but don't have the tools to make things right. They want to reconnect, but their fear of intimacy still outweighs their desire to return. So they choose the path of least resistance, keep you in their mind, but stay out of your life. And you, if you're not grounded in your self-worth, may be pulled back into the cycle, watching for clues, overanalyzing silences, waiting on dots to turn into closure. Every online status, every 3 dots, every delay becomes a new emotional riddle. But you deserve more than that. This cycle will keep spinning until one of you is strong enough to step out of it. And if that person is you, remember this: walking away from someone who can't stay is not giving up, it's growing up. Not everyone who thinks of you is ready to love you well. And you don't need someone who comes back, you need someone who knows how to stay. And this is the silent tragedy in relationships with avoidance. You're not just dealing with an adult who's afraid you're colliding with a child who never learned that intimacy is safe. Every emotional loop, every withdrawal, every prolonged silence after closeness didn't start with you. It started long before you arrived, in a place they once called home. Most avoidantly attached individuals weren't born afraid of closeness. They learned it, and the first place they learned that fear was in childhood. In early life, a child needs consistent, warm, and attuned emotional responses to build a basic sense of trust. I am lovable, and the world is safe to connect with. But if a child grows up in an environment where their emotions are ignored, dismissed, or shamed, they internalize a very different message. Don't rely on anyone, they won't be there. Maybe their parents were overwhelmed, emotionally distant, or themselves carrying unhealed wounds. Maybe the child was only praised for being quiet, logical, or self-reliant. No one noticed when they were sad. No one held them when they cried. So they began to form a survival rule that's simple but brutal. Take care of yourself. Emotions are dangerous. The more you need someone, the more they'll hurt you. So they grow up. They're praised for being independent, taught to be strong. But deep down, there's an emotional wasteland, a place no one has ever come close enough to see. And when they finally enter a relationship where emotions are the glue, they don't know what to do with all that closeness. Love, for them, isn't like breathing, it's like deep-sea diving without oxygen. So even if they seem intelligent, accomplished, or outwardly confident, the moment you come close enough to touch that abandoned inner landscape, their defenses kick in. You're not speaking to a logical adult anymore, you're awakening a wounded child who learned to manage fear by controlling distance. And the painful truth is, they don't even realize this. They think they just need space, that they're not built for commitment, or that they're not ready. But those are just masks. The real issue lies far deeper. They never learned how to stay with an emotion without fleeing. So they create emotional patterns like houses with automatic doors. You step in, it feels warm for a moment. Then suddenly, the door slams shut and you're left outside, wondering what just happened. But the door didn't close because you did something wrong. It closed because their internal system is wired to protect, not connect. When you understand that avoidant behavior isn't just a mood, but a defense system rooted in early survival, you stop trying to earn your place in their life. Because your worth isn't measured by how much you can change them. Your worth is in your ability to see the truth clearly and still choose to protect yourself. And if they ever truly want to heal, that process doesn't begin with coming back to you. It begins with going back to the child within them, the one who was left alone first. And this is when you need to turn inward, because in the midst of all the emotional loops, the mixed signals, and the unexplained withdrawal, it's easy to lose sight of your own self-worth. It's easy for the story to become, if only I were less sensitive, if only I had been more patient, if only I hadn't said that. But the truth is, you didn't do anything wrong. Being discarded, cut off without warning, isn't proof that you weren't good enough. It's the result of someone who didn't have the capacity to handle the closeness you brought. And if you truly reached a deep place within them, then their flight wasn't a reflection of you. It was a reflection of the fear they've never faced. Understanding this is the first step in stopping the personalization of pain. Because what makes the hurt linger isn't just the loss, it's the wrong conclusion. I must not have been enough. And it's that conclusion that keeps you stuck in the wound. In truth, the feelings you're carrying are not proof of your weakness. They are evidence that you know how to love. Evidence that you were brave enough to be close, to be honest, to offer hope. And that is never something to be ashamed of. But you must also remember, loving someone doesn't mean doing the work they refuse to do for themselves. You cannot heal a person who is running from their own heart. And you don't need to shrink who you are to be accepted. Sometimes, the most painful part isn't that they left, it's the silence they left behind. A silence with no explanation, no closure, no words to help you soothe yourself. But you need to know that silence isn't apathy. It's a survival strategy. Avoidants don't know how to manage intense emotions, so they choose the most extreme avoidance, cutting off, disappearing, and staying silent. On the surface, they may seem calm, even indifferent, but inside, their body is reacting. Their heart races, cortisol spikes. Their nervous system is on high alert, because for them, emotional closeness is a threat. And the paradox is, while you're hurting from that silence, they're not at peace either. They may be wrestling with regret, remembering, reliving moments, but they won't say it. Because saying it would mean feeling it, and feeling is what they've trained themselves to avoid. They watch your stories but don't like them. They think about you but never message. They stay silent not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't know how to say it without losing control. That silence is not a full stop, it's an unnamed wound. And while they let it sit there in the shadows, you don't have to. You have the right to name your pain, to seek clarity, to heal, and most importantly, you have the right to move on without an apology. You don't need closure from them because true closure doesn't come from their answers. It comes from your decision not to let their silence define your worth. And now, as you've walked through this journey through unexplained disappearances, emotional spirals, childhood attachment wounds, and the illusion of indifference, pause for a moment and look back at yourself. Not through the eyes that once waited for someone to return, but through the eyes of someone who loved fully and now knows they deserve to be loved fully in return. You don't have to measure your worth by whether someone comes back. You don't need to do anything more to prove you are enough. You were always enough when you had the courage to love, the honesty to show up, and the strength to face this pain without abandoning yourself. Letting go is not failure. Letting go is choosing not to keep sacrificing yourself for someone who couldn't build something solid with you. It's understanding that real love doesn't have to be chased, decoded, or endured. Real love is where you can stay, be seen, be heard, and never have to shrink to fit. If they couldn't hold you, it wasn't because you weren't worthy, it was because they weren't ready. And you no longer have to wait for someone who isn't ready. Because somewhere, there is a kind of love that doesn't need to be convinced to exist. So move forward, not in anger, but in peace, in self-respect, with a voice that says clearly, I deserve the kind of love that stays.